I'm so glad we're getting through this part. And on top of that, I'm happy that it's a short arc. I've mentioned I don't like this bad guy, this doctor dude. He seems so much like a. He's so much of a throwaway bad guy. I've liked the girl Komaki. I think that's how her name is pronounced. I think she's cool so far. I'm really hoping that she ends up staying a member of like the main cast, or at least main cast like adjacent. I don't want her to pretty much be written off after this. Essentially, like even if she's somebody that is like she shows up maybe every other arc, or even if she's a reoccurring character from a school perspective, like whenever we're not in like big more plot exorcism style stuff, it's like they're just at school. She shows up, she's always maybe doing stuff with the main cast, but I didn't like this bad guy. I felt like he should have been the antagonist right before we saw the actual Senju Doji, because personality wise, he's just kind of like that, the scummy bad guy that's made to hate, but he showed up right after we got Senju Doji, and he just has a lesser power first, so he just felt kind of boring. And when you have a villain like that who not only like power wise is boring, but like personality wise is pretty boring, and it was in the setup like I didn't think Komaki was gonna die. I figured they'd save her. Like it'd be really unfortunate to lose a character like that at the very start, and it'd just be like I don't know. I felt like it would just be like one of those times where it's just the author wanting to set you up to be sad instead of like a much bigger kind of story written death. It's like more of like, hey, I'm going to introduce this really nice character and get you to, a couple chapters, get you to like her and then kill her off. I'm glad it's not that, because that would have just been unfortunate, because it's like I was just getting attached to her. I didn't love her yet, but I was like, oh, I kind of like this girl. She seems pretty cool. But, I don't know, this bad dude was definitely not somebody that I really cared at all to see keep going. He, like, every chapter that he was still in, I was just like, can we just get rid of this dude? Can we just cut him off now? Like, why is he still here? He's pretty boring. He's lame. I mean, I can get why, like, the character like this exists. Like, it's showing that, people that work for Senju Doji are crazy. They're heartless. They're just absolute monsters. And I assume that any human that we'll see beyond this is going to be of a similar nature. Like, we're just going to see people who are absolute scum if they're willing to side with like a phantom like Senju Doji. But I feel like this should have been like a chapter or so less, or just make this guy more interesting. Either way, though, like it was a pretty solid way to beat him. I did really like that Riku was one of the key factors in it, with her putting up the disintegration barriers. I like her so far. She has been my favorite character so far in the whole series. I really enjoy her personality, and I really enjoy her role that she's presented to herself. I've mentioned that many times, because one of the things I really and genuinely like about her is just how, even though she's not a fighter, she's like, I have to figure out a way to be, of use. She's not a violent person, but she still wants to do whatever she can in order to provide use, provide support, provide a reason to be there, and something that, is giving an edge to everybody on our team. I do genuinely like that, because I don't think that a character has to be a fighter, but I do think that if a character is around enough in, a series like this, they have to have something that they're bringing to the table. They have to have something that they can stay relevant. And when you have something one like that, kind of like I've mentioned as like a really good comparison, and I do still think it fits, is someone like Orihime from Bleach. She had like her Tsubaki summon was the way that it was formatted with her personality, it would never work, because she's never like much of a fighter. She's not like wanting to kill people, so her like rejection to like the idea of somebody with Tsubaki would never be that powerful, because even bad people she didn't really want to hurt. So she decided to take that and figure out a way to make it better in her support and healing, because she's an amazing support and healer. And Riku already had that kind of moment. She's just like, I just want to be able to bring something to the team. I want to be of aid to other people. And I genuinely like that. I think that she's been really cool so far. The series itself is enjoyable. I like the art. I like the themes of it. I've always enjoyed the whole idea of like sorcery and exorcisms and whatnot. and especially when it's done in a way that while having a very different main cast. Like I like Iori. I think he's pretty cool too. His whole like being selfish is definitely different from other main characters, but so far he hasn't been that standout for me outside of that. But Riku, but I mean, obviously it's early. It's not like he's a bad character. It's just that he hasn't had like probably his larger scale moments yet. Like whatever his big early like moment, I'm guessing is going to be saved for like the first major arc is just my assumption. Like whenever we're gonna get like maybe like the first enemy he has to really overcome in such a drastic way. Like any series you can kind of look at in these battle shonens, you know what I mean? Whenever you have that first big battle for the main character, and then they have to learn something or they have some breakthroughs. It just up and coming is kind of like with him is really it. Like he will get there, I assume, as long as the series survives. And I think it sold pretty well in the first volume, so I'm sure it'll be fine. Riku, though, is definitely, in my opinion, the character that if I was going to try and convince somebody to get into Phantom Seer, like the art and stuff is already really good, and I've seen people wanting to get it just from that. Like Yayoi is really cool, but obviously we haven't seen that much of her. But, if somebody said, show me, like, a good character, I'd probably show her Riku. Because Riku is just, at the moment, a very genuinely likable person. That's another thing that makes her very, very enjoyable. On top of that is she has a very strong personality in who she is and why she's doing what she's doing. But Komaki getting fixed, I like that, like I said. I'm just really hoping that she doesn't fall out of relevance. I'm really hoping that she ends up being, just being around. It doesn't actually have to be a fighter, but I just hope that she doesn't fall out of relevancy. And then at the end of the chapter, the one thing that I actually am really curious about, because we saw the doctor guy, after he lost the arm, he started to shrivel up and get old. And it turns out he's, I think they said 82 or 83? Yeah, 82. So the interesting thing about that, if Senju Doji can pretty much make people stop aging with their power, is what the author could probably do with that. Like, could there be like mentionings of these really old characters or just in general somebody that lived X amount of time ago and it's like, oh, they can pop up because they have some phantom power that makes it so they stop aging. That's why they, this murderer or this mass murderer disappeared. Like you could do something like that. You could have like, oh, Senju Doji actually went over to, was it Europe? I assume it was, no, it was London. Wasn't it? And I'm trying to remember. I didn't even say his name. Like, got Jack the Ripper. Because Jack the Ripper just stopped, right? And then you could have something like, oh, well, Senju Doji heard of this amazing serial killer and then went and recruited him. And that's why he stopped and then, went on some different kind of rampage. Something like that I think would be really interesting to do. So, who knows? Obviously, the series is still very fresh. We're only, 19 chapters in. And I'm looking forward to more. Like I said, even if I wasn't too hyped on this last part, these last couple chapters, it doesn't mean I have any issues with the series overall. It's just, I think this bad guy should have been before Senju Doji, because you had the actual Senju Doji, who was really interesting, and then you had, like, this dude who had only, like, a weaker version of what Senju Doji's ability was, and in the hands of a very, bad guy. Is guys like this, you have that guy who's just built in there to hate. But it would have worked so much better if it was reversed and Senju Doji was the one we're seeing now, and we saw this guy a couple chapters before. Just because he wasn't very interesting. I really don't think he was an interesting bad guy, and it was just in such a placement that I think made it less interesting. But we're going to be moving on to a new set of characters, and I am excited. I kind of want to know more, maybe like other, like the rankings of the Phantoms. Is like Senju Doji one of the top class ones? Like maybe there's like 8 or whatever, some Phantom number. As well as other shamans. Like there's a lot of stuff up and coming I'm actually really interested in seeing. But other than that, though, I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed that Komaki is, somebody that stays around. Outside of that, comment below, thumbs up the video, but from the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But other than that, I appreciate everybody's already subscribed, and thank you all for listening. Bye.